The worst thing about Elden Ring is the open world. I just finished the game and was thinking where would I rank it among other Souls games. Am I the only one who feels that way? The best part of the Elden Ring has nothing to do with the open world. All the underground castles, Stormvale, Raya Lucaria, Lindell, Hallitree, and Farum Azula, in my opinion, the best part of the game. What do they all have in common? They are basically normal soul style levels. I really don't feel like the game would be worse if they condensed the open world by like 65%. After a while, you just realize that the open world is copy pasted churches, ruins, forts, towers, and dragons. All the interesting and well designed areas are just set pieces separated by fillers. Is it cool seeing these places on the horizon and traveling to them? Absolutely. However, I don't feel like the open world adds enough quality to the game so that it can stand on its own without those set pieces. If all the Elden Ring was the open world minus those areas, it won't be a good game. The game is good despite its open world, not because of it. Before I start, I am not a native speaker, so please excuse the grammatical mistakes. So I bought Elden Ring about 2 weeks ago and greatly enjoying the game. It is a good game with fun bosses, good armor and weapon design, cultivating to look places and interesting places. It has some great enemy variety and NPC designs, some awesome and weird dungeons overall, except for one thing, the open world. I love open world games. I know over the years they have become infamous with Ubisoft style open world filling up the rest of the genre. But despite all that, I still love open world games. Elden Ring, despite doing a lot of things right, in my opinion, really missed the open world aspect of the game. Here's my opinion as to why. I think FromSoftware took the term open world too literally. Because the world is too open and empty, the map is big, no doubt about it. But that big map is really empty. You just run around with your horses. Come to ruins or some special places telegraphed in map. Deal with enemies or talk to the NPC in there. Collect some things and restart the process over and over again. The dungeons like places feels like how the game meant to be played. This is one thing that really hurts the open world image of your game. As soon as I enter the magic school or big castles or some underground crypts or something, the game immediately changes and feels like this is how it meant to be played. Without your horses and fairly linear but full of secret areas, the open world is fairly boring with beautiful landscapes. But I'm sorry, but I'm not so impressed by beautiful landscapes anymore. I've seen this in every Souls games. Despite the open world in its name, the game feels linear. The main reason for that is that there is generally no reason for you to go back to any ruins or crypts or castles or something. So you just go forward to this open world, and only freedom you have is that in however order you approach those places you want to go. Other than that, you just finish up the places and never look back. I think the main reason there's always no places you want to really go back to is there those places are not replayable. There's only one town like the places that is Jar Town, and even that places is easily missable. There is no proper interaction with anyone other than killing. I feel that I feel like the round table hold should have been in the overworld rather than the place you access by teleporting. Dark Souls 2 fairly criticized as the black sheep of the game, but the main heart of the game, Majula, is very nice. You always go to that place to find something interesting or unlock some new techniques or new secrets. I think Elden Ring's hub should have been something like that. Lastly, I think the most important thing is that there is no event or encounters going on. I believe most eventful thing happens in some form of Radan soldier fighting with Kaled monsters in open world. For example, when you walk around New Vegas, like Fallout New Vegas, you can encounter a town burning and people crucified. Then you meet a man with excitement in his voice. He says, I won the lottery. You are baffled, not understanding what happens. Then you encounter the legends of this place and learn the story of that region, how they were punished for their heinous acts. This type of encounters never happens in Elden Ring. I know as a narrative standpoint it is not ideal to do this kind of living things in Elden Ring, but FromSoftware's storytelling is so cryptic that you just miss it. Either way, Elden Ring feels like a very uneventful type of game for 100 hours long. I feel like I talk shit about this game a lot, but you have to understand all of my complaints are just about this so called open world aspect of the game, which is, in my opinion, if you lose that aspect, the game doesn't lose much of its value. Hell, even I would argue that it gains some of its value. The pseudo open world of Elden Ring, as I said, is just boring. The game is praised for its open world aspect because the bar is so low. There is this huge wave of people hating on Ubisoft for making bad games that happen to be in open world. And of course, they got the hate for them. But when Elden Ring come with novelty, but when Elden Ring came with the novelty of having no map markers, the hype was over the roof. And those clowns who kept playing Ubisoft and EA games got stuck with Elden Ring and said that it was the best open world game ever made. These are the same people who played through those games once and never touched them again. And keep that in mind. They play through those games once and say that it was the best game ever. But once you start replaying Elden Ring, you first noticing the huge flaws of this game. You start noticing the flaws of this game. Elden Ring Elden Ring's open world has no open world activities. These open world bosses are just boring and repetitive. Dungeons and caves are way too mediocre to be a FromSoftware game, and exploration is just normal Souls exploration with extra filler steps that end up hurting the game on a long run. There's not a single instance in the game where you have to look for keys or levers to open a new passage, and there is lack of meaningful shortcuts. Let that sink in. There is no intricate level design with unique properties that define them, other than the usual poison swamps. The only three good areas in this game is the Stormvale Castle, the Lindwell Volcano Manor with Haligtree barely touching the bar. And look, I'm not asking for Dark Souls 4, but this is a Souls game that doesn't have what it makes Souls game so good in the first place. Actually, it does. Remembrance bosses and legacy dungeons. Yeah, less than half of the game's overall content. The novelty of the lack of quest markers and map markers get old so fast. Even the director of the game was surprised that the game was rated so high. Replaying Elden Ring is a mistake that many people do, and it's crazy. In my first run, after defeating Morgoth, I just realized that it's best to go through these interesting castles and boss domains. which later I learned are called legacy dungeons. Because the open world part of the game is just soulless. The combat in Elden Ring also doesn't help. It is just a same old 10-year-old combat system of roll spam dodges. There is not a single thing different about this game and Dark Souls 3 in its combat design. It is the same roll spam aspect that is so shallow. It was good in earlier games when it was slow paced and genuine stamina management was a thing. But in this game, there was no such thing as stamina management because you get so much regeneration of stamina that you can just ignore that aspect. After I finished the New Game Plus, I quickly urged to play Bloodborne or Dark Souls 1. The open world aspect of the game was so boring. In past games, you always had obstacles around your path, which both the fact that it is open world and you have a horse to facilitate. In Elden Ring, you essentially never needing to interact with those enemies in any sort of way. Very rarely you will find something actually be on your way. This is something I appreciated about the older games. How every enemy was at least some degree of threat, whether it because they are difficult foes or they could just end up swarming you or trapping you in a closed off location. That isn't to say that you can just run up past stuff, but you don't always have the same amount of freedom you do in Elden Ring to avoid majority of the threats. It just makes it feel like you going out of your way to fight them. Everything felt tighter, more refined in the older games. There is only so much you can do before having to fight past an area and clear a bosses. The developer could account for such things and still keep surrounding areas reasonably challenging. In Elden Ring, you can just ignore the entire zone, grab tons of stuff, get some upgrades, and come back and decimate that area with much overpowered builds. I understand the freedom to make the game easy or hard as you want is some kind of a positive aspect to some people, but I feel like this takes away from the overall Soul's identity. I know this was a thing you could do in the past games, but it is not nearly as bad as it was in Elden Ring. You cannot do that much, especially for a newer player. But in Elden Ring, any new player, after they having spent time with the game, like 2 to 3 hours, can find a busted items and just trivialize the combat. Then there's the loot system. Like I said, it's still a Souls game, so you expect to either find a weapon or a spell or an armor as a reward for clearing most things, which is fine if it were a Souls RPG game where you are always on the hunt for better and better gear. But Elden Ring is not. You don't need to trade out your starting gear. Everything is viable. Not all weapons will fit your build. Not all spells will fit your build, or at all for non magic users. Armor sets are primarily fashion, as in sometimes you get a crafting materials as a reward for exploring. And crafting is pretty bare bones, so I don't find that particularly valuable. Because of this, the side content becomes useless on a subsequent playthrough if you aren't going to use it whatever it rewards you. Let's just say that if you are a mage, well, there is no point going on about this or that cave because it gives you something you can't use in your builds, which is against means that you're just out of your way to do it. If you do for a reward can't make use of, then there is no point in going out of your way to find stuff in this open world. That is also terrible in terms of quest design. FromSoft doesn't use traditional quest. It's the same old vague NPC quest we had since 2009, and they don't fit the world of Elden Ring. It was easier to stumble upon NPCs and naturally continue your quest lines during those restricted environments in the earlier games. In Elden Ring, good freaking luck finding all I have to say. Out of all the games to require NPC guidelines, Elden Ring definitely sits top of the list. So overall, I feel Elden Ring's open world feels relatively empty and unrewarding to me due to not featuring some important key concept that makes the traditional RPG have to flesh out the world and make it more engaging. All of Now that's to say all of it is not Elden Ring's fault. It's just that FromSoft have going on about trying to combine the soul aspect of the game with the open world aspect of the game, and as a result, they did it neither. Elden Ring is not a good open world game, and it's also not a good Souls game. It it comes on a weird middle ground where it doesn't facilitate most of the good things about both the aspects so clearly. I never felt so bored or uninterested in a game like I do in Elden Ring, and I have played every single From Software Souls roster since the release. All the irrelevant content and poor handling of PvP this time around were exaggerated because the actual core flaw of this game is much goes much deeper than this. Overall, I hope that From Software never make another open world game again because they suck at it. They're not good at it. From Software should return to making linear games. That's what they do best. And I hope that they don't uh, follow up on this game and make a sequel and do the same mistake ever again.